What's up, Newb University? Did you get invited to play fantasy football but you don't know how to get started? Well, stay tuned because my next guest has a lot of information that might help you pull out that W. Thank you, everybody, for coming in for the next episode of Newb University. Today we have a very special guest. Seeing as we're getting really close to NFL season, I thought we'd bring in my very good friend, Mr. Joseph Fuller. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, no problem. So I brought you on the show because, something magical is about to happen here in a few weeks.
Oh, man. This is the best time of the year for football fans and fantasy football enthusiasts also.
Yes, for sure. Now, one reason I wanted to bring you on, and I want to share a little quick thing with everybody. You were my coach a couple of years ago on my fantasy league.
The league that you won.
Yes. And here's the funny part. I will be honest with the audience. I do not know very much about fantasy football. I enjoy football. One of the greatest sports ever, but I do not know how to play fantasy football. So I reached out to Joe because I know you're on multiple leagues. I was like, "Can you give me a hand?" And you know what? He coached me to victory, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. He did.
I didn't get any of the winnings though. I didn't even get a beer. I'm still waiting on that.
We'll have to get together. Maybe if we win this year.
All right.
So let's talk football here. For all the people that and this is going to be very prevalent to everybody fairly soon around the office because everyone's going to be invited to all these fantasy football leagues, and they're going to go, I don't know how to play. Let's break things down a little bit. So let's say, for example, next week we get an invite from somebody in the office and say, Hey, I want to play football. All Where do we start?
Hey, I want to play football. First thing you should probably do is sign up, figure out what the league settings are, if it's a 12-team league, 10-team league, if it's standard point per reception, half PPR, if it's a best ball league. There's all different types of formats of fantasy football. I know for most casual fantasy football players, it's normally going to be a 12-team redraft league. And what that means is everyone starts from scratch and they pick draft order and you go 1 to 12 and back up and down to maybe about 15 rounds of players are selected, and then you start your season.
Good. Yeah, definitely. That was one of the good things that you kind of gave me as advice was, do a mock draft. And I remember I did that and I got to the actual draft and, I kind of had my team prepared and I had, a couple C's that I was like, okay, these are the top 10 guys that I want to pick. Cause for sure, by the time I got to maybe the third or fourth pick, all the guys I wanted were gone and I'm scurrying to find who's going to be next on the roster. So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about your story behind fantasy football. Do you remember when the first time you played fantasy football was?
Oh, like it was yesterday. No. So, before fantasy football, my first love is basketball. Mm-hmm. So, Henry Wynn, a good friend of both of ours, I played fantasy basketball with him, and that introduced me into fantasy sports, picking people up, learning about the players, learning about all the teams in the league, and keeping up year to year. And it's a natural transgression because basketball has 82 games in a season, right? And, when we're young, we have the time to pay attention to all 82 games and keep up with all the news day to day, week to week. Well, as you get older and you start having families and you start having the full-time jobs and whatnot, you don't have as much time to invest into it. And so it's a natural progression for me to go from a league that has so many games to a league that has lesser games. And, NFL 17 weeks in a season, 16 games. So that's what brought me to that. Henry, he started a fantasy football league, a bunch of people from his work, some close friends of his. And, I remember my first time. I was not very good at all. I was not a football fan when I first started. I was not a football fan. I didn't know anything. I had friends, Marcus Elsie. I have friends
Shout out
that
to
played.
Marcus.
It was a Mark. I have friends that played football, and I will watch it. And I knew Deion Sanders and Emmitt Smith, but I did not know football. And when I started playing fantasy football with Henry, that's what began my love for that. I always tell people, especially newer people for fantasy sports, it's like Dungeons and Dragons, but for jocks.
Yeah. That's an excellent way of putting it. Yeah, I think you're right on the spot on that. And one of the things that's interesting that I did find myself, so I wasn't an avid football fan. I enjoyed watching the game and I understood it a little bit, but I wasn't I wasn't a diehard, I'm going to watch this. But I found that through fantasy football you start building that, right? So so you're like, you start rooting for your team players, and that exposes you to the teams themselves, and you kind of start picking sides all of a sudden.
Exactly. It turns casual fans into fans. Yes.
Yeah,
Like I said, I had no idea who were the best quarterbacks, who was the top, running backs in the league, wide receivers, and now I know the best one, or the good players, bad teams, good teams, upcoming players to look out for. It's just, as you get more and more involved with it, it brings you that fandom, and you've grown to love it. So
yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, because I see you guys are in it. I mean, how many leagues do you do? Multiple leagues every time you play?
I do multiple leagues. So I tapered back because it's hard to do a ton of leagues because you get your players mixed up, and you forget to set your lineup one week, or you forget to pick up a key player that you have your eye on in one league. So I do 3 leagues.
Wow, that's
I limit myself to 3. One's a keeper league. I do with a bunch of good friends of mine. That's year to year. We keep players going into the next year, and it's a year-long thing for us because we trade picks back and forth and whatnot. And so I do that one. I do my work league, to build camaraderie with my coworkers, and then I do I co-sponsor a league with Henry. We do a 2 quarterback league, and just 3 leagues. I can't do any more than that, so don't ask me.
No, I had my hands full with one league, and one of the interesting things. So I noticed as I began really into fantasy football, it was one of those things where I would look at look at my lineup, and I was just first I was just like, just auto, just whatever. Whatever the system tells me to do, that's what I'm going to go for. But then I noticed I started playing, paying really close attention to the games, and I was like, this guy's kind of looking rough. And then I was like, okay, so-and-so's injured, because I wouldn't know half the time they got injured until I was playing it. I'm like, how come he's not getting any points? And then, he's out.
You're like, don't.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit, and again, this is more geared towards the newbie, right? Someone who's never played sports. We actually have a league at work, and a lot of people, when we were discussing the league, were kind of hesitant to do so because they're like, we don't know what it's about.
Yeah.
So let's put their fears aside a little bit, and let's talk through how it works, right? So we start off with doing the draft, right?
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about that. Now, how do we build a good team? What makes a good team for you, in your opinion?
So to build a good team, you need to draft good players.
Right.
That's all it is. No, okay. No. So I know there's a ton of different draft strategies. I know last year the big draft strategy that was out there was the no running back draft strategy, where you put all your assets into every other position but running backs, and then get your running backs late. Which a lot of people end up losing because they were doing that strategy. But yeah, no, definitely. So if you're brand new to it, you want to first figure out the scoring system, find out what type of league format it is. Like I said, the majority of the leagues that I've noticed are 12-team redraft leagues, which means that everyone starts from scratch and they draft their players. Standard scoring system nowadays is point per reception. Back in the day, it wasn't point per reception. And point per reception means if the quarterback tosses the ball to someone and they catch it, they automatically get a point. So And then you just want to know, if there's any bonus points, any bonus scoring systems that go into it. So my best advice for someone that's brand new that wants to get into the league, they should definitely look at their league settings to see how points are scored, so they can be able to prioritize. Because if I was drafting for a point per reception league, I would prioritize different players in my draft order than I would for someone in a standard league. So.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's definitely good advice. So let's say, for example, we are going through the draft process, and you mentioned one of the draft strategies was no running back, right? And I know that my draft strategy when I talked to you was like pick up the running backs.
Pick up your running backs.
So what are we looking for in a good running back, in your opinion?
So the NFL has changed a lot. The premier running backs both are able to run in between the seams, and they're involved in the passing game. So I don't want to get into specifics. So I don't want to confuse a lot of people, but I'm going to get into specifics. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, those are Ezekiel Elliott to an extent. Well, he's holding out for contract business. I don't know when this is going out. He may be over, may not, but yeah, those are your running backs that are able to run up in between the seams. They get the volume, meaning they get the ball majority of the plays, offensive plays, and they actually get some catching work too. So
that's good. And how much do you pay any attention to preseason when you're going through the pre-draft process? Do you look at that at all?
So I don't pay attention to preseason. The only preseason I pay attention to is preseason 2 and 3, because those are when the NFL teams start playing. Like they actually will play their starters for an extended period of time, especially week 3 for the preseason. But I am paying attention to football well before the preseason starts. I'm looking to see coaching changes, where players are being traded, who's doing well in conditioning camps, preseason camps, and things of that nature. So, yeah.
How do you keep your lineup fresh? Like, what are you looking for to make sure that your lineup every week is, you got strong players?
Your optimum lineup?
Yes.
So you definitely want to pay attention to your injury reports. Make sure the players are not hampered by injuries, or you want to look at potential matchups. And I tell everybody this. I even told you this before too. You don't win at the draft. You could draft a good team, but you got to manage it. You can't just sit on your laurels like, all right, this is my team. I'm not dropping anyone. I'm not trading anyone. Like, you got to continually manage the team and cut players. You see opportunity on the waiver wire, you got to jump on it. You're going to make some mistakes, but every once in a while you hit a gem. I know last year I hit a gem with James Conner. He was an undrafted running back on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Le'Veon Bell was holding out from the preseason for contract negotiations, and every analyst was telling you, "Oh, Le'Veon Bell, don't worry, he's going to be back week 1. The holdout can't go further than week 2. He wants his money." Oh, and then they keep updating it. Well, he can hold out for 6 weeks, but after 6 weeks, he has to come back. And Le'Veon Bell ended up holding out the whole season, and I ended up with James Conner, and he was running back 5 the number 5 ranked running back, if I'm not mistaken. And, he was one of my key contributing factors to winning my football league. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't know when it's like an unknown, right?
Yeah, yeah. You got to assess. It's all about risk assessment, You definitely want to let's go back to the draft. When you're drafting, you want to, especially through the first 3 rounds, you want to pick up your studs. Those are going to be your foundation. Those theoretically should be the best players on your team, and that you should have no doubt about starting every week. So, definitely those first 3 picks, you want to draft your studs, and those, yeah. So after those first 3 picks, 4, 5, 6. You could start taking some risk, but you want to take educated risk. One of the popular draft strategy, or a draft strategy that I adapted about 5 years ago, and I've won 3 championships since I've done it, is tier-based drafting. So basically what it is you put players into tiers. And as you're drafting, if there's someone in a top tier, you take them. So I know a lot of people, they'll want to draft based on need. Like, oh, I already have 2 running backs. I need a wide receiver. And they'll just draft a wide receiver where there could be they'll draft like a tier 5 wide receiver, right? But there's a tier 3 running back still on the board. You take the best available player. Oh. So, yeah. And that's just a for instance. And, players, they tend to, they draft based on what they feel like they need. Oh, there's an open quarterback spot. I got to get a quarterback. Whereas, all the quarterbacks, if you're not drafting one of the top 3 quarterbacks, all the other quarterbacks score about the same amount of points. You could wait.
Yeah, that's one thing that I did. I remember it was subconsciously did, and I wasn't too caught up on my quarterback because I remember I spoke to you and you're like, fill the other positions. Your quarterback's not really going to make that much of a difference.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
in the end, your quarterbacks. I mean, aside from the top 2 guys, unless you were picking a Brady back then, you're going to get about the same amount of points.
Yeah, because think about it. If just your standard redraft league is a quarterback, 2 running backs, maybe what is it? 2 wide receivers, 3 wide receivers. So you're only going to play 1 quarterback a week, or that's the only. But you got to play 2 running backs. You got to play 2 to 3 wide receivers. Why would you spend all your draft capital on just this one player and just sacrifice the other players? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's why I always suggest, like, hey, don't. You could wait on quarterback. Honestly, you can. I've won many leagues. My keeper league, I drafted my quarterback in round 10. I ended up with Ben Roethlisberger, and he was the number 3 ranked quarterback last year.
Oh,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You could wait. Yeah, so it's all about based on position scarcity. And to explain what position scarcity is like I told you, you got to look and see the top players in that position, what they score. And after those top players, you got to see how big of a point drop-off it is. So you mentioned before that my advice to you last year was get running backs because those are the most scarce in that position. Your top running backs. It's a huge point drop off from your top ones to your from like top tier to the next tier over. So position scarcity, man. That's all, and that's why I always recommend if you're going to draft, do a tier-based draft so you can stick to that position scarcity, and you're not getting caught into like a run. One person drafts a quarterback, then the next person panics and drafts a quarterback. And before you know it, everyone's drafting a quarterback. You're like, oh, I need a quarterback. When you don't need a quarterback. You can go ahead and get that wide receiver that's like a tier 2, tier 3, instead of getting a tier 7 quarterback,
Yeah, that's definitely some good advice. I never thought about that position scarcity. That's actually some good solid advice. So hopefully our audience out there gets to pick something, takes a little bit something out of that. I know that you won something that was kind of special that we were looking. I was hoping to get out there because there's somebody out there that's going to be very upset with how that goes. So in your league, you guys actually exchange. Is it a belt or? Oh,
so the 2 quarterback league that I run with Henry, mm-hmm. We have a championship belt, and so I am no longer the title holder. I lost that belt last year. But yeah, no, it's great. It's a nice white belt. It's white with gold on it, and fantasy football champion. And we have a big to do every fantasy draft season. Right before we draft, we present the belt to the winner, and have like a crowning celebration. Well, it's not really a celebration. Everybody's booing the winner. So the year that I won it, that was the year that hurricane occurred. What was the name of the hurricane?
Let's see. There's Katrina. There's been Rita. There's been Ike.
Was it? I don't have no. Rita. I think it was Rita, the most recent one in Houston. So our fantasy draft was the weekend that the stupid hurricane occurred, right? I had custom made a Ric Flair type robe. Woo! I bedazzled that joker, man. I spent 2 weeks gluing sequin onto this freaking robe, and then this damn hurricane came out of nowhere. But you know what? I still shot a video, and I sent it to everybody in the league with me strutting in that robe.
So now you got to win so you can strut the robe.
Well, I'm thinking about wearing a robe to my keepers league. So last year I won my keepers league, and we do the trophy presentation at the draft, and it's a giant gold football, and it's a really cool. It's a heavy trophy too, and I'm thinking about wearing a robe to that. But then those guys don't like me already, so I don't want to throw fuel to the fire so they don't trade with me in the season, you know?
That's funny. Yeah, man. See, and I like the way you guys are taking that approach because it takes the edge off of things. One thing I noticed, and one of the guys on our league, he was experiencing that kind of a burnout. He didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of the things where I noticed he was taking it way too seriously,
Yeah.
And I know, his heart wasn't in it, where he was before. It seemed like he was all about fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prevent that from happening for you since you've been doing it for so long?
Oh man. So some people, it's built into some people. It's not for everybody, I know people join with every full attention. Oh man, I'm going to pay attention to everything. I'm going to keep on playing. But when they start losing, that's usually when you see the burnout happen. One of their studs that they drafted in the first 3 rounds get injured, and they're like, oh man, what do I do? And nobody wants to trade with them, and people are picking up people off the waiver wire that they could have used, and it's just one of those things, man. Fantasy, it's fun when you're winning, but when you're losing and you can't stop the bleeding, you get discouraged. And I wish I had a better answer, but yeah, it's either you have it or you don't. And either you want to persevere or you don't. I know one of the things we instilled in the 2 quarterback league that I sponsor, we have bonus payouts, right? So we'll pay out your amendments fee to the team with the highest amount of points in any given week of the season. That gives people the incentive, like, hey, my team sucks, but I might get lucky one week and I may score 250 points in this 1 week and I get my money back. So, yeah, it's just little incentives like that keeps people interested in it. I think so. Yeah, I guess I did have an answer for that. Yeah, if you're a league commissioner and you want to keep people involved, throw out little cash incentives for the regular season to keep people interested. So,
no, that's definitely good. I know in our league we kind of. And I, of course, not being so deep into it, I didn't take it too serious. And I found, that was fun for me because I wasn't, I didn't have that on my back or, oh man, I'm losing.
Mm-hmm.
I was there to have fun.
And you're also able to text me for help.
That did help a lot. I'm like, Coach, who do I say? No, it was funny because I remember when that was happening and I'm going through the paces and I'm like, man, I don't know who to set my lineup. Let me text Joe real quick. I'm like, Joe, here's my players. Who do I set up?
It definitely helps.
So it was good. No, I enjoyed it. So one of the other things I wanted to touch on, right? So we talked about, throughout the season, you got your pick, you're setting your lineup. All right, let's talk about the waiver wire and how do we know who to pick up at that point? Because, there's going to be those weeks where you don't have that player anymore. You guys they're going to have that bye week. What do you do in that case?
So, you got to have your hands in many different pots, right? Cast your pole in different ponds, so to speak. I use multiple resources to keep on top of trends that happen in NFL. So I use Twitter. I follow different fantasy football analysts. I use this nifty app called SleeperBot that keeps me up to date on injuries. If somebody's doing super awesome one week, if it kind of filters down all the noise and it presents it to you, and you're able to make decisions based on that. I listen to multiple podcasts. One of my favorite podcasts is the Fantasy Footballers. Those guys have a lot of great knowledge, and they present it in such a friendly way, fan-friendly way. I listen to Fantasy Pros, and those guys also a lot of great knowledge, and it's good just to get different takes from different analysts, and you take all of that in, and then you make your decision. So
that's good advice. All right, so that's definitely good for those weeks that you have your bye and you have to pick up some room for the waiver wire.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about trading, because that can get a little nasty, right? I mean, that's and to be honest, I never had to do it in my league just because I didn't want to go through the pain of like, hey, can I pick up so and so from you?
Yeah.
So what do you do for? What's your strategy when it comes to trading?
So when it comes to trading, I look. So if I identify a need that I have, like, oh man, I need a wide receiver, like, I'm not going to have anyone good for this next 3-4 weeks because all my matchups are trash for, So I'll look for trading partners I'll look to see what they need. That way I could present them a trade that is fair for both of us, because everybody wants fair trades. Nobody wants to give up something for nothing. So that's what I do. Once I identify my need, I'll see what I have an overabundance of, and then I'll look for potential trading partners to identify who needs what I have, and they have what I need, and we can try to make a trade. But some people just don't like trading. Like I said earlier, you don't win your league at the draft, but a lot of people think they do, and they don't want to touch their teams, and they don't want to trade with nobody because they feel like I have the best team. And unfortunately that happens, but you just got to try to move on to different to different trading partners, throw it out there. All you can do is tell right? So
yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's definitely good advice for that, because it's one of the things I didn't know enough about fantasy football to understand the whole trading process.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I didn't do it. It was just I was like, oh, I have my team, and I'll just pick from the waiver wire when I need to. And luckily for me, I ended up winning that league. Now, what was funny about that whole situation, and I know you know the story, but so the first time I played fantasy football, I think I came in third or fourth place, something like that. Second time I did it, I ended up winning. And then after our league was over, somebody from the office was like, hey, let's play squares. I was like, I've never played squares. What are we talking about? They told me what it was. You give us some money, you pick your numbers, and guess what? I ended up winning.
Super Bowl squares. Yeah, those are the best.
So I ended up winning, and I was like, man, I love this stuff.
Yeah, it's fun when you're winning.
So it was one of those things where it was like, maybe it's better to be ignorant at the game. That way you have way more fun and zero expectation.
See, that's what got you hooked. You were winning right off the bat. You didn't have to go through the years of losing like most of us.
Yeah, I didn't have to claw through it. That's for sure. I didn't have to. I was like, man, this football. I don't know why people stress about it. It's easy. Look at this. I'm winning.
Yeah, so easy.
That's good. That's good. So tell me a little about your league, because one of the things that I found is you build relationships, and this is aside from the whole fantasy football league, from the football. This is more of a personal thing, because I noticed, and our league was at work, and I interacted with people that I'd never actually talked to.
Exactly.
It was one of those things where like you started talking to people and you would have to like communicate. You're talking trash on the chat.
Oh yeah. You're jabbering each other.
Exactly. So for the people out there who are kind of they're kind of on the fence about joining, what is one thing that you could tell them, like, hey, this is an added benefit that you're going to get from this?
Oh yeah, man. Just like you said, you're able to make relationships or create relationships with people that you normally wouldn't interact with, especially in office leagues. And that's why I love office leagues. We'll get together and at lunchtime, we'll talk fantasy sports. I'm talking with our HRIS team, the guy from legal, IT, compensation, just a bunch of us. We'll get together and we'll just talk, just people you don't interact with at all. Some of my personal leagues, I'm in a league, my keeper league, I was brought into by my buddy Steven. And I only knew two people in the league, the league commissioner, Mike, and Brett. I knew them from when I worked at Walmart. And the rest of the guys in the league, I don't know. But being in that league for so long, I've built relationships. I instant message people all the time. A good friend of mine, Shane, we're bitter rivals because we're in the same division, and we both have awesome players, and we're always plotting against each other. But we could separate the two, and like I had a good conversation with him, just talking about our kids. Like, how's your kid doing? Oh yeah, your boy's getting big. It just creates built friendships, because you probably know it's harder to make friends when you get older. My son, I take my son to Taekwondo classes, and I'll talk to the parents. My son goes, "Oh, Dad, you made a new friend?" I'm like, "I don't make friends. I'm too old for making new friends."
That's that Drake strategy. No new friends. No new friends.
No new friends. I'm too old to make new friends. He's my acquaintance.
That's good.
So, but yeah, no, definitely. If you want to build new relationships, fantasy sports is the way to go, especially fantasy football. You get together, and it's cool because the games happen, Thursdays and Sundays and Mondays. And Thursday nights after work, I get together with Henry, my buddy Darren. I didn't know him until we started playing fantasy sports. He in totally different industries. I'm oil gas. Darren's in banking industry. It's just, it's awesome. It's cool. It's really cool. I think that's what I like most about fantasy sports, is just interacting with different people that I normally wouldn't interact with in my world. Yeah,
definitely. I agree with that, because like I said, I found that out when I played the first time, is dealing with new people. It was really good to get to know them. Now, let's talk a little bit about the negative aspects, because there, like with everything, there's got to be something that's bad. What's something that you go, okay, man, this is kind of like the ugly side of fantasy football?
Oh, so we're fantasy football enthusiasts, especially the ones that take it seriously, that does the homework, that that really digs into it. We want to win. Like, I've always been competitive. I did track, cross country. I played basketball. I'm a competitive person. So with that said, it can get a little nippy, especially with trades, when you feel like someone's taking advantage of someone else. And I had a couple of instances. My buddy Shane, he pulled off a trade, and I was like, oh man, blah blah blah. And we went back and forth. We reconciled. That was years ago, and the trade ended up not being in his favor. But things like that can cause a stink, especially when you're really competitive and you really want to win and you're trying to win and you feel like someone's colluding. And collusion. Oh. Collusion.
It's those damn Russians. So that brings up a neat kind of segue into this. So outside of football, the league is over. We're done with the league. We got our winners. What happens next, right? Are you done with fantasy football at that point?
So you take a brief. So I'm never done with, I'm done analyzing, but I'm always keep my ear to what's happening in the league. The NFL has changed a lot over the years. NFL is now a year-long league. There's always something happening, and it feels like it's in quick succession. Super Bowl's over. Next thing you know, it's the combine, and then next thing you know, it's the rookie draft, and players going to free agency. Coaches are signing everywhere. They're signing new offensive coordinators. Then the rookies go into training camp, and then before you know it, they go into OTAs. And I think the only time I get a break is in July when there's maybe 3-4 weeks of no football activity. All the players are on vacation. They're on the beach somewhere doing their thing. And then before you know it, you're back in it again, man. So.
Oh, that's a long commitment for you.
Well, so you definitely gotta. I know one year I got burnt out listening to all the voices, trying to filter everything in, and you definitely. I know myself. I'll take a break after the Super Bowl, and I won't pick it up again until after rookie draft.
That's good. Good advice. So as we're winding things down here, let's give a few tips, right? So we talked about the basics of drafting and things like that. So let's say we got one person that's still kind of on the fence whether I should join the league or not. How do we put them at ease that everything's going to be okay?
Do it. No. Just do it. No, definitely. Go for it, man. It's fun. It's as fun as you make it. You'll make new friends. You build camaraderie. You build hang out with coworkers that you wouldn't never hang out with before. Like I said, Thursday night games. We'll go to Buffalo Wild Wings and hang out and drink a couple beers and watch football, and we'll talk football. And if you don't take it super seriously, especially when it's your first year, you're still trying to learn. You should go into it. You're wanting to do well, but don't go into it super seriously where you make it a negative experience for yourself. Go through it. Do your homework. Try to learn who the players are. No, definitely especially your first year. This is a filling out section. You want to learn the league and learn what fantasy football is. And you got to learn the players. You're not going to win the league in the first year. I'll tell you that right now. There's too many people out there that, like myself, that I've been doing this for 8-9 years. So there's a lot of people out there that really know their stuff, and if you're just now getting into it, don't go in into expecting to win. Use it as a learning experience. Definitely, you want to check out the podcast I mentioned before, Fantasy Footballers, Fantasy Pros. Utilize Sleeper app. That's a great source. I highly recommend that. Before your draft, you want to do a mock draft. Just do a couple mock drafts, and don't do it super early. I will wait until the week before you draft, because they're playing preseason football games now. So you do. Let's say you do 100 mock drafts right now, and then 3 or 4 key players get hurt. All your mock drafts are worthless because they included these top players. So I definitely will recommend doing a mock draft a couple of days before your actual football draft, just to get the feel of, how all the different possible scenarios that could happen drafting your position. I definitely would recommend, I spoke before about position scarcity, not panicking, knowing who the studs are, trying to acquire as many of the studs as you can, and really sticking to a tier-based draft strategy. I know, and you're asking how you build a tier-based strategy. There's plenty of resources online. FantasyPros.com is one of my favorites. There's fantasy footballers have one too, but there is tons of resources. Definitely, the more information you pull in and you pull together to help you make a good, educated decision, you'll be the better for it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, because you're turning it into a marathon and not a sprint at that point. So
yes, exactly.
That's a good way of thinking. And so, with that said, pretty much getting to the end of the show. So you want to give a shout out to anybody out there?
Oh yeah. I want to shout out to my wife. I love you very much, Jody. Our sons, Sebastian and Daniel, and Marcus Elsie.
Yeah, always a shout out to Marcus
Elsie.
All right, well, that's the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining me, Joe.
I appreciate it, man. It was fun. Yeah, I could talk football all day, man.
Well, yeah, appreciate it. Well, thank you, everybody out there, for joining us. And again, like always, please comment, like, and subscribe. It helps out the channel greatly. All right, thanks, everybody.
Salud.
Salud.